Hey folks, it's Nate. Thanks for joining me at the art table again today, and I wanted to bring you another indie comic review. I got the second volume of Shield Maiden in. I have an actual physical item to look at today, unlike the digital review I did of book one, and I have some thoughts. Let's start, as we usually do, with the physical item itself. This is an interesting format. As you can see, it's a larger book than your typical trade paperback. It is square bound, perfect bound, it looks like. Very good quality cover, and it feels nice in the hand. It's big, it's impressive. The pages really show off that artwork well. This is really nice. The interior pages are not high gloss paper. This is kind of more of a high quality newsprint almost, it feels like. It holds the ink really well. It pops a lot. You don't get as many glare issues as you get with high gloss paper, which is nice. It feels like a good art book. All in all, great quality on the physical item. Both volumes are like this, so Asa Whately, who is the guy who ran this project, clearly found a good printer and stuck with it. This is a great item for the money. The length is, I forget if there are page numbers in this. I think it's about 80 pages, with some of it being behind the scenes stuff, which is pretty cool, and about probably 64 pages of actual story. So let's talk a little bit about the art in here. As with the previous volume of this, and I will link my review of volume 1 down below, there are multiple artists. In fact, there are 3 distinct art styles in this story, or in this collection, to go with 3 separate stories. And the art is a little bit of a mixed bag. Some of it is great, some of it is not to my taste. It has going for it what the first volume had for it, which is that there is very strong, clear art direction. You can pretty much always tell who the Shield Maiden is, except for the middle story. And this is the shortest one, so I can kind of forgive this, but the character design is really masculine in this one for some reason, which is odd. The Shield Maiden is clearly a very tough woman in most of the stories, but in this middle one, she just looks like a dude, which is odd. There was really, really clear, strong art direction. You could still tell who she was. She had the red hair. She had the shield. So all in all, that was a bit of a miss. For overall quality, the art is good, though. And I enjoyed all 3 of these artists and what they brought to the table. Each of them has a slightly different set of skills. For the first story, that was illustrated by Katie Fleming, the second by Alex Moore, and the third by Alex Schlitz. And of the 3, I think Alex Schlitz's work appealed to me the most. Katie Fleming, however, gives her characters very expressive faces, which was important for that story. And Alex Moore has a good sense of space as he choreographs action, which was very important for that story, which is, each of these artists was well chosen for their story. So I think that Asa did a great job matching his artists to the stories he wanted to tell. Again, I think the art direction in Playing with Fire could have been a little bit better, but overall, pretty good. Let's talk about the storytelling in here. And I had some good things to say about the first volume and some bad things to say about the first volume. And I have pretty much the same to say here. Basically, all of the critiques I made in the first volume stand. And really, since I did my review of the first volume at the time after the time of the second campaign, that's not really surprising. It's not like Asa could have seen that and used that feedback in second volume, and there's nothing saying that authors have to use feedback in a following volume. It is a warning that if you found any of those critiques a turnoff in the first volume, and it doesn't get any better in the second volume. To recap what those are, the good points of the story is that Asa has a good sense of dialogue and exposition and world building, and he balances all of that really well. He has a sense of what I refer to as quiet in the story. There are whole pages that have nothing but sound effects, no real meaningful dialogue on them, as you see in this page. That's a good and an important part of storytelling. And he has a sense of building up conflict that is very good. And I think actually he may show better in this collection than he did in the first one. My critiques are that first, he does not seem to have he doesn't seem to give us a lot of the Shield Maiden's interiority. And what I mean by that is we see the Shield Maiden doing things, we see her interacting with people, but we don't get a whole lot of her thoughts on that. We don't get a whole lot of how she sees the world or how she thinks of the world. There is an exception to that. In a duel in the first story, she actually has a segment where she refuses to fight a man who is unarmed. So we get the sense that she has some kind of understanding of honor. In the second story, she crashes through the front door of a house that's on fire, and then later she pays the family for the door, but their house still burned down. So I'm not sure what to make out of that. There seems to be more going on beneath the surface of the Shield Maiden that we haven't necessarily gotten. Unfortunately, now that we are 2 volumes into the story, I kind of really feel like I should have gotten at least some of that interiority, not all of it, but some, to help me invest more in the character, and I haven't gotten it. The second thing that I mentioned in there is that she does not seem to fight in the Shield Maiden fights like a man, and that is something that bugs me in a very realistic story. And in his notes here, Asa says he's going for a mixture of the fantastical nature of a Norse saga and a very grounded, realistic, historic perspective. The problem is there are very grounded, realistic, historical ways to fight as a woman against a man, because there are just distinctions between women and men. I know that's not very in fashion to say now, but it is. And I would have been fine with a Shield Maiden being able to fight a man on equal footing if there was some kind of supernatural aspect to her power. We know she at least appears to be blessed by Thor in some way. And maybe that could make her stand on equal with the men she's fighting physically because she has the blessing of Thor. But the reality is, if there is no kind of magic or supernaturally based justification for that, a man cannot fight on equal footing with a woman. The woman is going to be at a disadvantage, and I would like to see those disadvantages taken into account in the Shield Maiden's fights if she's not meant to be a supernatural fighter, which again, I haven't seen any signs of. So that continues to be a deeply frustrating part of the story for me, especially because the kinds of finesse and tactics that you see in these fighting systems designed for smaller people to fight larger people are really visually very interesting and could be a great part of the comic storytelling if they were integrated, but they're not. And that does bother me some. The third issue is that there is no sense of the Shield Maiden's community or what her place in society is. And this is especially bothering me because she seems to be functioning as a mercenary. And mercenaries are pretty rare in societies that don't have a really strong vertical hierarchy. You see kings hiring mercenaries. You don't generally see tribal leaders hiring mercenaries because the mercenary becomes a threat to the tribal leader, and they then have to get rid of them. And so it's really not a great deal for either the tribal leader or the mercenary because they just wind up at loggerheads all the time, and it's very easy to anticipate. And, I can kind of understand what Ace is going for here. He's going for a kind of a almost Western feeling, roving, person with no name. And I can kind of appreciate that, but I just don't feel like it kind of fits with what I know of the Norse. And again, I'm not an expert on this. I've only read a couple of sagas. None of them dealt with mercenaries or shield maidens, so I don't know if those things were common in Norse society. What I know about shield maidens is kind of far removed. there is based on a mix of pop culture and discussions of people who actually study this particular part of history. So again, I'm not an expert here, but shield maidens tend to be a part of a community rather than wandering mercenaries. That is my understanding. So I would have liked to see like some kind of explanation of how this role in the society became common, what it means, how societies interact with this kind of a person without very predictable kinds of conflict coming up. And again, none of that is in this story. We do get a lot of interesting storytelling with bits of Norse culture mixed in, and that's fine. And it's well executed. As I said, I think Whately has become better at setting up and building up his conflict from a premise to a very very sharp climax and quick denouement, which you want in a collection of vignettes like this. But the strengths of the storytelling are, in my opinion, no longer enough to counteract the weaknesses I see in it. And so I can't really recommend Sagas of the Shield Maiden unless you get it just for the art, which is quite good. I could understand people buying this book just for the art. But as for me, I don't recommend purchasing it for anything other than that. And I do not intend to continue with the series. But those are just my thoughts on Sagas of the Shield Maiden. If you've read this, let me know what you think down in the comments below. There's a like button and subscribe button there you can use as you see fit, and I will talk to you later.